You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Data Center Therapy, a podcast from Ivoxy Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I am your host, Matt Yeti, and I'm once again joined by my co-host, Mr. Matt Cozzolino. Matt, how are you?
I'm pretty great today. It's a wonderful sunny day.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
You're looking great today.
Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome. And for those of you who are watching us on the tube, you can see we're joined by two other gents. First and foremost, I'll introduce someone who you may be familiar with, our Director of Consulting, Networking Extraordinaire, Mack. Mack, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be on the show today.
Good to have you on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been a minute since we've had you, but secondarily, I think we'll find out why we've got the crew on here. The fourth participant here is someone certainly new to the podcast, newer to Ivoxy Consulting, Mr. Robert Clack. Robert, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right. So tell us, who is Robert? How long you've been here now? 6 months? I'm going to get that wrong.
About
probably.
6-7 months, something like that.
Okay. So who are you? Who are you, and what are you doing here?
What would you say you do here?
Well, I would say I do network consulting. I guess that's my official title. That's what I've been told. I've been working in the IT infrastructure environment now for 27 years. Sounds kind of crazy when you actually, it feels like 5 minutes, but it's not when you actually look back on it. So yeah, I've been doing everything from systems administration to networking. My career slid more over to networking, hardware, switching, firewalls, security devices, storage away from the Windows environment. But that's pretty much where they say my expertise is.
So let's
we'll put quotes around.
Have you pulled token ring before?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Just wanted to, that kind of puts a little bit of a timestamp.
Yeah,
about X25. You ever worked with X25?
Yes. Yeah.
I only worked with it as a pull string, so we were cutting it out and running Ethernet, and that stuff makes a heck of a good pull string for getting it through the ceilings. So yeah, that was my limit with token ring.
Yeah, I remember we did bandwidth throttling on a T1, which was we don't think about that stuff anymore.
Yeah. T1s used to be fast.
Mm-hmm. Used to be the thing.
My entire college campus was run on a T1, and that was when Napster hit, and it wasn't so fast. Yep. So the reason we've got y'all together here is we're talking about network assessments today. Now, if you're familiar with Ivoxy, this may be commonplace to you, but if not, we really differentiate ourselves and built up organically from our educational offerings. And it's not like, here's this thing, you should buy it. It's, let's talk about this area where there might be a little bit of short understanding and enlighten everybody, educate, and then to get a greater understanding so any dollar I may spend is spent in the right possible way. So I've talked about it before. Ivoxy starts out saying, hey, this VMware thing is probably going to be monstrous. And we do educational classes. We don't sell a single thing, but then, you need networking, you need shared storage, you need compute, you need security, and on. And organically, the company grows into this consultancy firm. But, throughout that undercurrent of all of that have been assessments. And that is really, what are we looking at? What is the current state of things? What are the best practices that we want to get to? And what's the gap that exists between the two? And one of the ways that we assess that from a networking side of things is the networking assessment. Now, Kaz, you've done a number of these, right?
I have. I think Robert and I are actually the two that kind of wear or can wear both hats and do the systems work and do some of the network work. I know for me, when we get into some of the crazy routing stuff, I start asking for help. But yeah, we've been doing them both.
And that makes me proud at Ivoxy as well that I pick on these people here, but here they are. They're making $500,000. These super smart engineers at Amazon, right? They're doing deep data analytics or whatever algorithm writing, and they can do that better than anybody on the planet. You ask them to install a printer driver though, and they fall over. Like That's fine. That's great. We need people like that. But I also think that at Avoxy, you say, jack of all trades, master of none. I think we're a jack of a lot of trades and master of quite a few as well. Most of the people on the team, we're not just siloed into a specific thing. And Robert, it's good to know that you're, like you heard storage there. You talk to most networking guys, you might not hear that.
Right.
You won't hear storage or virtualization from me. You don't want me in your vSphere, I assure you of that.
Yeah, but you're one of those guys making $500,000 a year, Mack, doing a lot of smart networking stuff.
I'll keep reaching for that rainbow. That all sounds good until tax day, I guess. But
and it also helps too because networking doesn't exist in a silo, right? To understand what's consuming the network, what's connected to it, and the applications and that infrastructure connected to. That just helps you understand, why are we doing what we're doing anyway? What am I assessing for? Am I assessing for end user compute? Am I assessing for storage, infrastructure, distribution, etc.? Yeah. So you've got one going on, you said, Matt?
A network assessment right now?
Yeah.
No, not like today, not like this week.
Right.
I don't have one in flight right now. No.
Right.
But I have done a couple of them in the past, and I personally have done quite a bit of network work. Most of the time I end up staying in the data center unless someone needs help, another hand for a larger campus project type thing. So that's usually where I end up.
And I've seen it where it's kind of like in networking, gents, forgive me if I make a faux pas here, but networking is almost like an Active Directory forest. How many people are managing and administering the network that they designed and put in place in the first place?
Yeah.
Few. You probably have inherited this mess from somebody.
Yeah, most of the time, what I've seen over the years is networks evolve. They grow organically, right? And they keep going until they run out of steam, right? That's where you basically outgrow the design, right? And then you have to implement a redesign, and then you have to actually look at the network. And if you're going to redesign anything, you got to know. It's easy to know where you want to be, but you can't figure out a plan to get there if you don't know where you're at. And that's what the network assessment does, is it gives you a good picture of where you're at. And you can do these yourself. You can hire somebody to do them for you. We have a pretty good process in place in Avoxy for how we execute network assessments, an actual process that we go through. That's worked out really well for us over the years. And it's a nice report and stuff we put together for our customers. With that, and the thing with assessments, anytime you're assessment, you always think about grading, right? Nobody wants to get a report card that they got like a D- on their infrastructure, right? I don't want to show that to my boss. We don't do that. I don't recommend anybody do that. We always look forward, not backwards, because we understand how business operates. So we do red light, yellow light, green light, right? The red stuff is what you want to focus on first. The yellow is what you would focus on second, and if you ever had any spare time left, then you'd focus on the green stuff, in the report.
And to that 3-color tier, Mac, one thing that I've loved, and that applies to our vSphere assessments, our storage assessments, our assessments. We use that same kind of approach. I really like it because, just as you said, it's not a report card where you fail, but not only is it a red, okay, this is a critical issue, but we also provide, okay, what is the step to mitigation? And so let's say it's a non-disruptive setting, right? It's critical, okay, fine, but it's this little one command that you run, and it doesn't impact any service, and you can run it during the day. Those kind of things are laid out. Or it's critical, it takes these steps to fix it, and it can only happen in the maintenance window because it requires an outage or a reboot of the switch. Or it's green, it's no big deal, or it's yellow, right? But maybe it's no big deal, it's best practice, and it does take an awful lot of time. So you still know that, hey, that's got to be a maintenance window thing if we choose to do that. But then you can sort and rank and kind of bubble sort and say, hey, these are the issues that I have to tackle first, and I'm going to sort them by level of effort. These are the really easy ones I can pop in any time. These require a bit more planning. All of that is what's assessed. So it's not just like, hey, that's wrong, you should do something about it. That's wrong, this is how much it matters, and this is how much impact it is to actually go ahead and fix it.
Yeah, it's risk and level of effort to fix stuff. It's like a good example of what something green might be, naming convention on all the gear, the switches and routers. Let's say you had 100 switches and you want to do maintenance on them. If you don't have a good naming convention, how do you know which one you have to log into? go look it up in a spreadsheet, it just slows you down, right? That's a good example of what an assessment would uncover and then would flag as green, because it's not mission critical. If your naming convention is not right, it's not like anything's going to not work. It just means that the administrator is working harder to manage the system.
I will say more and more as I start interacting with stuff, I try to be less and less concerned about what I as a human care about. And as to your point there, the switches will still pass data if they're named starship names or human names or animal names or whatever, right? They'll still pass data. So
yeah, it was interesting with a good naming convention. I worked at Alaska Airlines for almost 10 years. We had 1,000 switches. I could log into any switch off the top of my head. Right, we just had a good naming convention to put together that made it really easy to do that.
I was in college and we had server names, and this is like the early 2000s, server names like Athena and whatever. And so when I started doing my own build, I don't know who I ran into. It was like my first job, and I said, I'm going to name my server at home this. And, oh, you don't want to do Greek mythology? That's lame. And ever since that, I've been put off that whole thing. I know it's gone from Star Trek to Star Wars and all these things that you can name, and now I just name them for purposes. And yeah.
Funny story, when I worked at the Cobalt Group, we had one of our data centers in Fisher Plaza. So everything was named Blowfish, Pufferfish. And it was F-I-S-C-H. Yeah, it was F-I-S-C-H-E-R. Fisher Plaza, spelled that way. But everything was named, all the servers were named after fishes. Yeah. Made it really hard to manage, I will tell you that, but it was cute.
My last job, we had an environment that was named, actually, I thought very well. The structure was 4 letters. The first 2 were location, and the second 2 were environmental. So it could be like a corporate environment or our ASP environment. So they would identify with that. And the middle was D, T, or P. Dev, test, production, and the last 4 dash, and then 4 like EX00 for the first Exchange server. So I thought that made a lot of sense. Except we've had DBAs. What's DBA stand for, guys?
Database administrator.
Don't bother asking. And then they would take one of the T servers and they'd start running. Oh, you know what? That works. We're going to just kind of move our prod stuff over to that, or it just turns into prod. And then 3 years later, guys, I'm going to move you over to the new instance. Well, what about all the people who are connected to T? Well, there's DNS strings, there's all this, but I might fat finger it when I connect to an RDP session. No. So yeah, T can very quickly become P without any renames also. Mm-hmm. But so naming is good though, because permanent. Yeah. It's like they're like comments in code, right? You didn't write the code, but at least I understand what the guy was trying to do if I come across a subroutine and that. So same goes for switches. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So assessments, diagrams as well, is that included typically as part of one?
So if you're going to do your own assessment, or obviously I'll go over the process we use every time we do assessments. There's 5 main areas that we would look at on an assessment: network infrastructure, network availability, network management, network performance, and network security. And under each of these, there's lots of things we look at. Like under network infrastructure, that's going to be the hierarchy of the design. We're going to look at the hardware, the iOS versions, the feature sets, licensing. Usually there's a walkthrough, so we're looking at physical security to the rooms that the gear is housed in. We're looking at the power and the cooling. The naming of the rooms, the MDFs and the IDFs, and then cabling standards as well. That's all under network infrastructure. Network availability, that's where we look more at the redundancy that keeps things up. So we look at spanning tree for all the safeguard protocols and stuff. That's kind of like your foundation for all networks. Your first hop protocols such as HSRP, VRRP, dynamic routing, if that's being ran, EIGRP, OSPF, BGP, etc. And then, any of the multi-lag technologies such as VSS, VPC, cross-stack ether channel, etc., and redundant power. Right? Not every part of the network needs to be redundant, so we, and oftentimes, like with HSRP, we find configurations not complete, on that, which would, work against you on
work because they haven't had to put it into action.
Right.
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 A lot of
and then
network.
Yeah. Then we do network performance. That's quality of service. Network design comes into performance. You can design a network so that it doesn't have performance, or that the performance is poor. Equipment provisioning, how stuff, standardizations on configurations, device configuration and such. Network security, we focus a lot on. This is different than cyber security, right? Network security is, do you lock down access to the devices? Are you using AAA and some form of radius or TACAX authentication, right? So that way you have password rotations. Do you do role-based access control so that only those that need access get access? It also includes the firewalls. Usually we do firewall rules and policies reviews. Make sure the firewall rules are valid and still in use. And we look at remote access VPN as well, all under network security. This would also include intrusion prevention devices, anything like that that's looking at the network from a security perspective. And then the last one we've already talked about briefly was network management, which is more than just naming conventions. It's also syslogging and network time protocol and management VLANs and network monitoring, alerting, and stuff like that. So those are the 5 big areas that we go over on every assessment, and it's worked out quite well for us. For the last 10 years or so doing these.
And I like it too, Matt, because you talk about those categories. But one of the main questions that we ask right off the bat before an assessment even gets designed is, what are you looking to achieve, right? Because an assessment is certainly is quote unquote. Mm-hmm. Right, because even though the areas you just listed might be exactly what we go over in order and all of that, it so much helps to say, what are we trying to accomplish here, Mr. Customer? What are you looking for? Because we can make sure to always have that in mind, that context, and then it's not just this, objective source of information. It's like it's objective information, but it also is subjective to the format and the needs that you're looking for going forward. So we're not rigid at all when it comes to that, which is nice.
That's actually a really great point, because I always ask what the reason for the assessment is. Is it insurance? Is it probably one of the best reasons I've heard was, hey, we just hired a new guy and he doesn't know where to begin, and we don't have a lot of good documentation on the infrastructure. So they leverage a network assessment to say, here's how the network's put together, here's the drawings of it, and focus on the red stuff first, the yellow stuff second, and the green stuff third, right? That works out really well.
So, Robert, what's your favorite thing? What do you like to do about, in the networking world and IT field? What have you seen out there that when you see, a challenge or a bit of work that you're excited for?
I mean, what excites me is designing and addressing an issue that someone's been struggling with, that they don't understand why it doesn't work. Maybe through no fault of their own, they're not in the position that they should be in, but they're filling it because they have a need and they can't see that extra step beyond, so they're not quite looking at the right thing. If I take one thing out of my work is fixing a problem that someone has struggled with, and addressing it, finding a solution. And if you could do that at minimal cost, great. But sometimes it requires, I'm like, hey, this is your problem. You cannot continue this way. You're going to have to look at different hardware here to fix. You've outgrown your design physically, or you've outgrown your design logically, or you made a weird choice when you routed traffic across this really small link that should have been routed over, this faster link. How do we fix that issue? That's what I enjoy doing. I think I told Mack when I got hired and said, look, I'm an engineer. I love designing, fixing, addressing. I don't like administrating. It's not my passion to administrate a network. Once it's fixed and done and everything's ready to go, I lose my passion for it. I'm like, okay, I'm on to the next problem, the next fix. That's what I love doing in the day.
I promise that wasn't planned or set up. By the way, Robert, fantastic answer. But I would say that applies to, that's Ivoxy Consulting. That could be a secondary mission statement. Just what Robert's answer was there. Like, hey, we enjoy taking a situation where somebody needs help and providing that help, and now getting over that hump, because fixing that problem that's been plaguing that's exhilarating in what we do, and I like how you answered that, Robert. Thanks. That's exactly how I would answer the same way in terms of that's what I like to do too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Now, if you can do it really quick, that's great. I mean, you always like someone go, "Holy smokes, you fixed that. We've been working on that for a week and we can't figure out how to do it." That, you always get a high up for that, but just actually fixing the problem is
But see, that's the strength of the generalist right there.
Yeah.
I remember I think I may have told this story before, but maybe one of my most favorite problems that fixed. Now, it took me forever to get there, so it's not like somebody fixed it, or I was working on it, then finally came to it. But I was running a small data center operations for a consulting company, and we had, I think we had 2 T1s coming into a Cisco router, and they were, so you got your balanced 3 meg circuit or however it was, and we finally got upgraded, and they were coming over physical serial connections. They were connected to the router, and they were replaced with a single 10 megabit Ethernet circuit handoff, which was, great, plugged into the same router. The router had an Ethernet WAN interface. We could go from there. I think it was it could have been an 871 Cisco, fellas, something like that. That might have been the platform. And what would happen was, I couldn't put my finger on it, but every so often, and this could be like a 40-hour thing, or there was an interval that it would stop passing traffic on the WAN, and you're looking at error log, nothing's really showing up why, but a reboot would clear it on the router. Okay, so a lot of TAC, a lot of this and that, and finally I was troubleshooting with a coworker, and we popped open show diag or something like that, where we were looking at the process is running, and then you could see how much memory each process is taking up, and we saw the ARP process continuing to go in memory consumption, and eventually that would fill up, and that was what happening. So what was happening was, and you guys will probably understand like the root cause of this a bit more than I explained it right here, but originally it was route 00 to serial 0/0. So the default route was referencing the physical interface of the T1s when the T1s are in. And so when we switched it, we just basically did IP route 00, Ethernet 00, or whatever the interface was called for that. At a 10 meg bandwidth, it was basically doing ARP lookups to translate the name of the interface to the MAC address. Whatever it was doing was not a direct, like if you gave it an IP address. It was doing a second step or a first step to get there. And on a 3 meg circuit, no problem. On the 10 meg circuit, it was overwhelming the process, so we had to change the default route statement to not use the physical interface name, but to use the next hop IP address instead. And it took a long time, but the feeling when we finally cleared that up was like, whoa, that was awesome.
If we're doing fun, weird stories, I got a quick one for you too. Customer, South Seattle, 2 sites.
Is this safe for work, Kaz? I just got to ask, coming from you, fun, weird, could be different.
South Seattle, 2 sites, wireless connectivity between the 2 sites, and at random times they would just lose connection to the other office. Turns out that 5 gigahertz wireless link is half of the bandwidth shares the spectrum with weather radar on airplanes. Yeah. So when airplanes are coming into land, they'd blast their weather radar for whatever reason, and the radios would drop.
And that is not an interval. That's not a repeated interval.
Nope. It's just random. All of a sudden this would drop, and then what the hell's going on? Yep.
Oh,
that was a fun one. Yeah.
I want a problem to never happen or always happen or repeatedly happen, not randomly happen.
Not when I'm standing there looking at it, right?
I have 60 gig radios.
Those types of problems are really hard to troubleshoot.
They were point to point.
Somewhat phishing.
We had one that gave us 100 meg, and we had 2 that gave us a gig. Top of the building, line of sight, but we had gig with like sub 1 millisecond ping times, and this is like 2005. It was amazing.
Pricey radios, yeah.
How far can you go with those?
Way cheaper than
being way up there in the spectrum like that. What's the distance?
As the crow flies, I would argue, a handful of miles, 6-7 miles maybe.
I imagine those were engineered microwave links, point-to-point microwave links.
They were.
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't like Wi-Fi. Like I said, 60 gigahertz. They were real.
We've been able to do a
real high
lot
frequency.
with bandwidth like that, but you gotta engineer it and do a whole thing there to make that happen.
And you can't just you have to line of sight. You need to be quite accurate. You've got the lineups going, and yeah, really kind of cool. Healthcare is a really interesting application for
our network guys having network issues.
Oh,
I hate that when that happens.
Robert, can you get Mack an assessment next chance you get?
Sounds like he knows what he's doing.
Hey, Mac. So we've got someone that can come take a look at your Wi-Fi at the house if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all good.
Healthcare was a fun one. I know. I came from a hospital. Personally, I came from a hospital a while ago, and
well, I think personally we all came from hospitals.
But
sorry, go ahead.
No, I came from working at a hospital, and I went to a school district. And, I get hired, I meet in the team, and one of the things I was hearing from the school district was, we do all of our changes through the summer, and we don't do anything during the school year. And I was confused at this, because I came from a hospital, and there is literally no downtime, right? Yeah. So
there's never a night where it's like, you know what, people don't need to be alive
tonight. They're fine. You can do that Thursday night. It'll be great.
You don't shut the emergency room down.
Yeah.
Or you give them a heads up before you do, and it's fine, right?
But I also found that with networking, and so if you looked at my resume, my career started as a network engineer. Like that's where it started, and then of course I get pulled into the server side. So I feel like I'm a bit of a generalist too, because I can, like Kaz, you spent more dedicated time in networking certainly, so you surpassed me by far on that. But yeah, I when you get into dynamic routing, leave it over there. We got smart guys to handle that kind of thing. But top of rack distribution, VLANs, channeling, things like that, well within my purview. But the train of thought that I had just left the station. It's gone where I was going with that. But yeah, it's something that really turns into. Oh, I know where I was going with it. Like you said about the school. When I was in one of those roles, a lot of it was network administration. There probably isn't a ton, right? It felt like if you were on one project, you were doing another project, doing another project. But then when you're not running through a project, you're not doing any changes, what are you doing as a network professional in operations? And, if you're running 802.1 action, authenticate, that can be a pain, like a lot of whack-a-mole there, things like that. I think at this point, a lot of it goes to security. And managing end devices for that, but to your point, I remember at my hospital job, it wasn't quite the educational thing, but there was a lot of, okay, what are we doing now? Okay, we'll go around and swap out the UPS batteries. Oh, okay, fun. But I think we see a lot of customers where they'll do that and they'll say, I don't need a full-time networking team because we're not changing things. Yeah. We just refresh our switches and we're good.
Yeah. What I've found. What I've found is as companies grow, it's really the size of the company. And until you get to be pretty decent mid-size, you really don't have 40 hours a week of work for a network engineer.
Right.
That's where the generalist or the systems guy who dabbles in networking here or there, does what he has to keep things working.
But I think that's also where we fit in really well in terms of supplementing that.
Oh, absolutely.
At any time.
Yeah. I was going to go over briefly, of all the network assessments, and I've done tons over the years with customers, what is it that every assessment has in it? What does everybody get hit on? I can show my cards on this, right? Cable management, cabling. Everybody gets hit on cabling. That's a tough one. It's usually a big spaghetti factory in the back. So I get a lot of people that apologize to me when they see their racks, and I'm like, dude, this is normal, right?
Yep.
So cabling and cabling standards, colors of the cables, types of the cables, that's always in every assessment because most people struggle with that. Spanning tree safeguards. Spanning tree, and I hear people say, well, we shut spanning tree off. Oh, I hope you don't do that. Spanning tree prevents the loops from occurring, and if a loop occurs without spanning tree turned on, it will take your network down. right? So it's important to have those safeguards in there for your root bridge safeguards and whatnot. And then naming convention, and that's why I mentioned naming convention earlier. That one actually most people get hit with too. It's usually what I find is you can tell the era of a person, their tenure at a company, right? Because you'll find like 2 or 3 different naming conventions depending on who worked there. Logins, authentication, that one most people get hit with too. They're using 2 or 3 different local logins, to get into the gear. And then, like things like network time protocols, syslogging, and monitoring. Every assessment has a section about that too, because folks generally don't do a good job at the management side of the house, and that's your gauges. I mean, you drive your car without a speedometer or a fuel gauge,
Yeah.
right? But I suspect things like your naming convention, network management stuff, it's the needs of the business outweigh the management stuff. So it's not like people are being neglected. They're just doing their job and don't have time to.
Because out-of-band management should be a thing, right, on all network gear.
Out-of-band management is out-of-band management is the panacea, especially with branch offices.
Yep. You probably don't see that much actually in practice. So it's a matter of just getting it done, being able to manage it versus properly layering in that out-of-band network and jump boxes and things of that nature.
Yeah,
NTP is one of those ones that I've seen, we talk about a lot, and more it's more and more important, and I see that just kind of existing, and we don't think about it because Active Directory just magically handles it, and I don't necessarily think about where my primary time servers are in my network. So that's one that I've run into a whole lot more often.
Any network deployment I have ever done in my entire career starts with network time protocol.
Yeah.
Like I put in the 2 core switches, that's tick and talk, and they go out and they find, I configure what their authoritative time source is going to be, and then everything else connects to tick and talk, the 2 core switches. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The time is really important. You can't troubleshoot stuff if your syslog times are all different.
One of our really important strong partners in terms of happy customers, and this is not networking, but it's data protection, is Rubrik, right? So they have, and I'm going to botch it, I don't know, I can't remember the name of it, but the clock that they use is locally determined. So think of immutability, and you say, hey, you cannot delete these backups until they've ran through the policy that you set originally. That's one method of security, right? Well, what happens if I can say, hey, guess what? It's now 2 weeks later. I'm an attacker. It's 2 weeks later. Okay, those backups are gone. Oops, just kidding. I'm going to set the clock back. So the ability of, like you said, troubleshooting, Mac, from a log timestamp standpoint is super important. But time is so often produced as a fact, as a true thing. And if you can manipulate that, or have it manipulated, all kinds of things can go wrong from that standpoint. Not the least of which being, root cause analysis or, post-mortem assessment on any kind of a breach. So super important to get NTP right.
Well, that and some things won't even work now. Like you can't join an ESXi server to my vCenter server if the clock is skewed more than 5 minutes or something, right?
Telephony has the same thing. If you're doing voice over IP systems, the clocks have to be within a certain margin of error.
Yep. I'm actually tempted to get the little GPS receiver and set up a GPS receiver in the house just for the hell of it.
Like an atomic clock?
Well, yeah, right?
Similar. I mean, you can get time off a GPS or an atomic clock. Either of those are sources.
You gonna set up a phone number, Kaz, we can call and you just repeat what time it is?
I could probably do that. Yeah. We get a VoIP phone, yeah.
Well, Mack and Robert, really appreciate you gents joining. It's been a little while since we've had you, Mack and Robert. It's really great to have you on the pod for the first time. Hopefully not the last. Would like to chat more here pretty soon.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's about it. Kaz, we don't have any announcements currently going on right now, do we?
I just taught a vSphere Advanced class, and if you didn't show up for that, you were missing out. So there's an announcement for you.
And that's 7 or that was 8?
That was 8.
That was 8. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Latest
That's good.
greatest.
Is there another one coming up or not yet?
There's absolutely one coming up. I have no idea when.
All right. Well, stay tuned here because we'll certainly put the word out when that is happening.
Exactly.
We have in Well, about a couple of weeks coming up, May 16th, we have a webinar with CrowdStrike. So if you have not yet heard from your account manager or want to attend that and talk about how that can secure endpoints and things of that nature, reach out, email us at podcast@ivoxy.com, and we can make sure you get that invite too. So Mack and Robert, thanks again. Matt,
Yeah, thanks,
always
everybody.
good to see you too. Thanks everybody for listening to another episode of Data Center Therapy. Have a great day, everyone.